One. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this latest in the ValuesJam guest session series. Anita, fantastic to have you here. To start with, please introduce yourself and tell everybody about the great work that you do.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I'm a sustainable fashion designer and an experimental designer on the top of that. And I do various stuff in the fields of education and creativity development. So it would be a pleasure for me today to be one of the people with whom you've played in person. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. And where are you at the moment, Anita? Because you travel a lot, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry for the background noise. I'm
There's
currently
no
at
noise.
the...
There's no noise.
That's so interesting. Okay, maybe that's the modern technology that blocks it out because there are buildings that are being built. Of course, that is right. I'm in the north part of Thailand, in the jungles. And it's a retreat space within the monastery.
Wow. Okay, well, I'm not sure how much silence do you have there then, or is it not that sort of retreat?
People who come for the 3 days retreat to learn about meditational techniques, they, I think, have 1.5 full day of silence. If we're talking about like personal silence, which is called in some schools of meditation, honorable silence. But actually, it's quite complicated to find a silent place here because I know exactly what time roosters wake up. It's 5:04. Because from 5:04 till 7:30, you just can't switch off that alarm. And it's interesting how it's actually, because I'm a night person and I still work sometimes at night and do a bit of writing here and there. So if you end up going to bed at 1:30, 2 a.m., so definitely 5, you would be expected to wake up. But it's interesting because like even within the meditation, and one of the practices I like since I learned it 12 years ago in India, that it's not about the silence. It's like when listening to every sound you can get the grasp of, you hear nothing. So it's like reaching the state of silence within the loudness of the environment.
Okay, so there's an interesting connection here because when we created ValuesJam, we wanted to focus not so much on what was being said, but more on listening to what was being said. Well, let's see what happens today. I'm going to tip out the cards from the ValuesJam card deck. So how many piles shall I make in front of me?
I want 2.5.
2.5, okay. That's the first time anybody's been as creative as 2.5. And now I have pile 1 and on my left-hand side and half on my right-hand side. So which pile would you like me to take?
I want the one in the middle.
Okay, that's the biggest one, Anita. So now a number between, let's see how many we've got, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30 cards. So a number between 1 and 30.
Could it be the third from the bottom, please?
The third from the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it can. And the card that you've chosen is this one.
How interesting.
So the first question is, what does positive impact mean? And from a more creative perspective, what does it look, feel, and sound like?
It's so interesting because I believe that would define my practice, but I've never thought of it that way. It feels like I wouldn't take the positive out of the equation personally because I don't like the dichotomy of the world. Because if it's positive, then there's an opportunity, there is somewhere that's negative. So for me, it felt nice when you mentioned it, like, oh, that's cool, impact, that's positive. But in a way, somehow deep down, I believe that any impact in kind like expected to be positive. And it should be pressure-free. That's how I want to feel about it.
Okay. And what about technically then? What does positive impact mean? You know, if somebody was to say to you, well, what's a definition?
I would say from the perspective of the space, though I know that most of the time we use it in regards of the interaction between people, right? Like to impact somebody in a positive way. I think it could be the space that we create for those people, as well as the space within which we do the practice. So every time I try to leave the space in a better condition than I found it. So I think it could be translated. I'm just like actually thinking out loud in front of you. It's not that it's something prepared. And I think it's maybe the same, like to leave somebody in a bit better state than you found them before. So like sometimes it could be just to put a smile on somebody's face good enough than rather just impacting their life good, right? And changing it upside down. And I think that's what takes the pressure away.
Yeah, so and I'm going kind of in a similar direction to you because I think of positive impact in quite simple terms actually. I think of what is it now? What is it? What was it before? And well, the difference is the positive impact. That's how I kind of think of it. I'm very curious about you've used the word pressure twice now. So pressure free, and that's what makes it pressure free. So could you just explain that a little bit more?
I think when I started my journey, and the journey was in sustainability to start with, as the industry in fashion that impacts negatively the world we know, right? And it's one of the dirtiest industries since we take into consideration like the concrete production, I guess. But there was like this pressure that I put on myself. I wanted to like change the world, you know, heal and save. Nobody asked me for. And I think it was like too much of a movement towards something that would be most of the time either confronted with like indifference, not being understood why. Like, especially when I started practicing and delivering workshops when in Russia, it's like sustainability is not even translated into the language properly. And it loses like lost in translation the meaning. So while transitioning from their definition that you have in English into what it is in Russian, is I think because we're catching up with the West world, right? It's like we're trying to understand maybe that's what they mean, but if it's not applicable or we don't want it to be applicable, right? Because it's like not on our issue. If it would be our issue, we would come up with the definition first. So like as we know that the definitions they arise after there is like a notion, like we feel there is something is changing, and then the definition kind of like the term usually is coined after we see recurring patterns. So I think because regarding sustainability, like I understood in order to produce sustainable fashion, I needed to educate the whole country through the educational workshops or whatever it is, a lot of free lectures, a lot of events, expert groups, and afterwards suggest them, right? But then it looked like I'm just selling my stuff.
Yeah.
Which actually on the one hand it is, because if you would like to be as a sustainable business, it's like people, planet, profit, and if you don't receive the profit, you can't again benefit people and impact positively people and planet and repeat the cycle. But in that case, I believe I wanted to impact as much as possible because I was like pressured by the expectation that we have clean drinking pure water for another like 15-20 years, right? And it's like the pollution rates were going higher and higher. So I think that was my own pressure that I put on myself. And I took it off after talking, I'm not sure, was it like one of them, a professors from the university, and I was frustrated with the world because I was impacting it positively, right? And I had this like force that would be confronting me, and it's like you are in a way not introducing something, you're fighting for it, which I think also has a lot of like energy which is negative, but it's like the energies that's not needed. It's not their interaction between people, it's like more of a translation of what you want for them to understand. And the day arrived when I had a workshop delivered And that day I decided I will go there with a free mind and I would not pressure myself. And if it's only one person after all of my years of career that would be impacted positively or impacted, and it would be just one person who I know now would be like my teammate, right? Or it's like she or he would be on my tribe of people who think the same way, that would be a life worth living, and that I succeeded. And when you kind of like bring it down to just one person, it was so easy. It was like I had a workshop with kids from unprotected social class, we call them, right? It's like single motherhood, kids with disabilities. For some reason, people whose houses were burned down go into that category, abusive families background and orphans. So there would be girls from that type of families. And because I try to reduce and eliminate waste in the world through my practices. So like I always work with the waste. So people bring their trash and we revisit it in order to create a product that would be useful and meaningful, so they would not throw that away. And it was interesting how they were bringing their garments, and I wanted them to create a hugging toy, you know, to have this like the dopamine release in their brain in case if something goes wrong or they don't have enough attention due to the circumstances within the family. And there was this one girl, she came up to me afterwards, she was 7 or 11, and she looked up at me and she said, my mom's old t-shirt now became a toy and I made it myself. I can't believe it. Like I can make anything. And I looked at her and I was like, wow, I achieved it. So I have this one person on my team. She's 8, right? She has her whole life ahead. And I think that was her eureka moment, aha moment. I saw that life in her eyes and I was like, good. So I took the pressure off.
Yeah.
And since then I deliver lectures, workshops. I don't need to impact anybody else. So that's why, like, right, it just comes naturally as a bonus because I've already got my one. So I think that's why, because I knew that it could be a lot of pressure and then that would warn people out and increase stress instead of enjoying the process, right? Sometimes we just bring ourselves in this like rat maze where we just like doing more for the sake of impacting more, and then eventually you just burn out. And I've been there, and it's like one depressed person can't do a lot.
Wow, Anita, you've just kind of, I don't know, I feel like my eyes have just been opened on this topic, and I've just been making some notes, and I've just got too many things to talk about here in response to what you've just mentioned, and I don't really know where to start. I think the place to start is that what you've said really brings home to me how positive impact is probably most effective when you are free from the weight of the result. So it's our natural tendency, right, to say, right, we're going to have a positive impact. Oh, okay. So how much positive impact are we going to have? Okay, let's set this target. And then it becomes a race to the target rather than the original reason that you set out for, which was to create the positive impact. And you've reminded me of a story from business. I was responsible for a portfolio of buildings in the UK, and we were providing a range of services. One of those services was to provide call centers, okay? And we were opening a new call center. So I said to my client, how do you want to deal with the targets and KPIs that we're going to have for this new call center? And he said, well, it needs to be a bit better than the call centers that already exist because, you know, it's a new service and the expectation will be that we will be able to create something better than we've already got. So I was like, okay, that's reasonable. But I'd recently come from a 5-star hotel background where I was all about striving to be just the very best you can be, right? Rather than this, it needs to be a little bit better than we've already got. So I didn't want to finish the conversation there. I just took it away, went to my team and said, guys, the client has said he thinks we need to be a bit better than the existing. What do you think? And they said, well, we're on a bonus. And so can you please keep the target as low as you can? If it has to be a bit better than the existing, just make it a small improvement. So this is confusing me, right? Because it doesn't fit with be the very best you can be. So I remember being kind of a bit confused about this because I knew I was going to maybe upset people or get them thinking I was a bit weird. But eventually I decided I went back to the client and I said, look, I've got this challenge because my team understandably wants to achieve their bonus. They don't want to be penalized. But I don't want to limit ourselves and I want to see what we can achieve. So how would you feel about guaranteeing the bonus in year one and not having a target and see what we can deliver? And fortunately, he was a pretty progressive guy, and so he agreed. And I think the existing KPI was something like 68%. And what he had been suggesting that we go for was somewhere in the region of 72%. And we actually delivered 90% in year one. So, you know, that's the power of positive impact when it's not weighed down by expectation.
I would also say it's the power of not having the grading system.
Yeah.
That's where you start school and universities. And that's what I do during my classes with the British students that I teach. So it's not the mark that I want them to kind of like look towards, right? And we all know that they need to graduate from the universities with good enough marks in order to afterwards like go for MA or maybe PhD. But I tell them from day one that there would be kind of like tests in place every Monday. We do the vocabulary checkup. It's not the vocabulary that's important. It's what they express in those conversations, which I would say the content is not as important, but the grammar. So like I'm faking it there because of course I listen to what they say in order to ask more questions, right? To provoke them to have deeper and deeper conversations about themselves. So like all through the class, what happened, they in a safe environment where they're not judged, because I don't care what you talk about as long as the grammar is there. That's my principle number one. And they say it out loud. First class. Second is there is no marks. I have the registry for kind of like attendance, and it's public, and it impacts nothing, but it's there with like, you know, red missed classes, and it's up to them. Like it's not that anybody is scolded. If they are late, I don't care. I wouldn't tell them off, but I would ask for an excuse, and the funnier the better. So it's like sometimes, you know, when they're late, it's like you're nervous, you think you will sit down silently. Like, no, you stop and wait, we finish the conversation, and then we all look at them. It's like, why are you late? So it's like everything that's usually in any system would be treated as like, you know, it's like you shouldn't be late, you shouldn't be after the teacher and stuff like that. It's like I'm not telling them off. I'm not there to raise them. What is that like? To educate them from the perspective of what the parents should have been done, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, and what happened? Apparently in Cambridge and Oxford, the expected amount of words they learn weekly is 50. With me, it's 150 expressions. Within each expressions, you can have up to 11 words.
Wow.
So after one term with me, they were able to speak, to practice and express themselves through the help of 2,570 expressions. And you need 2000 to sound like the difference between educated person and successful CEO entrepreneur in the US and their like building construction site worker is 200 versus 2000. So after one term, they can discuss any topics on politics, philosophy, you know, it's like science themselves, through themselves, using as much as any successful entrepreneur in a foreign language. and a very high level. And when I remember at some point the universities, I hope they would never see this video because I'm going to teach again in September. When the universities reached out and because they needed the mark, and I've already finished teaching the term, and I was like, I texted my students. I was like, so what's the expected mark for you? It's like, because I tell them what's your expected goal before we start. What mark do you want to receive, right? What should I do there for you? How can I help you to get there? And they said like, oh, we can't say, it's not ethical, whatever you would give us, we're happy with, which was cool, right? But I still went to them. And then he said like, okay, 98 out of 100. So I sent it back to the university, and the university saying like, how come they have 98 out of 100 is if the maximum for foreign language is 85? I was like, 85 it is. Is this my connection?
Yeah, it just
Can
dropped.
you hear me?
Just dropped. Yeah, you're back.
Yeah. So on the one hand, it's like because of the created space with no expectation, no pressure from the marks, right? It's like there is an expectation marks, like they would write an essay. Honestly, I wouldn't mark them, but I would read through to see their recurring mistakes. So afterwards, I'd write them during the class. There would be every test every Monday, which actually I didn't grade as well. And what I did, I trusted them to the point I will kind of like split them into couples of two. They test each other. They have like the 100 and 150. And then they tell me how much they know out of that pile, not how many they failed. And then I never, like I would come around and they try. So there is a person who is, I can see that she or he is not ready. I will bring them to me and we will start learning while the others take this time to practice. We will start learning to get the vocabulary. So it's not like, why are you not ready again for the test, right? Okay, you failed to learn. You didn't know what you're learning. It's kind of like method. Let's do it together. And while others manage to kind of like give 90 out of 100 with this person, at least within this hour, we always around 40, 30 expressions we kind of like nail. And they feel proud about themselves and they feel grateful for not being ashamed publicly. And next time they don't want to let me down. So next time they're ready.
Yeah.
And I just noticed that even by when they would say like, oh, today it's only 65 out of 100, I was like, okay, but maybe you need to revisit what time you were studying at day, night. How tired were you? Like, did you postpone it till the last night? It's like, and every week on Monday, they had another chance. So it's like, it's the chance they take on themselves. And, but you see, I don't think that's the thing. I think it's so impactful in a way because it's their space. It's created for them. It's created for their personal growth, for them to understand who they are in this world in order to then go and benefit the world. So, and now I know that since last time I taught, it's like 30 beautiful British human beings who are in their like early 20s, right? Full of aspiration and the belief. They now know who they are, what their studying methods are, and it would impact their life, right? Even when they would be joining a workplace, because it's like, what do I do? What do I do here? How do I learn? How I speed up the processes? And I know this world would be a better place because of those interactions I had with them. But I'm not sure if it's positive, because you would say that it sounds great. We need more teachers like that. When I advertise myself, people are like, oh my God, you're amazing. But in the process, I created the space where it's kind of like intense. And when they made a video for me that was very touching, and they made me cry how grateful they were for the experience when I stopped teaching them. And it was interesting how they said that I am the strictest teacher they've ever had, but the most humane. And I actually took that as a compliment because they didn't see me as a peer. They didn't see me as somebody. It's like, I was very fair. It's like, but you wouldn't see, it's like, it's not like I have one I favor over the others. It's like, it was so neutral to the point that if you're not talking, you're writing. If you're not writing, you're answering question. If you're not answering question, you're doing something. So it was 1.5 hours of stress per day, but I call it positive stress. And then they go and then they come back and then they go. And it's interesting because they always wanted to come back, even if Hanover. So that was a compliment to my teaching, I guess.
What you're touching on here as well is that it strikes me that a lot of people, when they're in a position of responsibility, project themselves into the situation too much when it's not necessary. So they make it very personal. You know, I'm responsible for your performance. Whereas in fact, I think the responsibility is more for creating the environment that is conducive to high performance. So it's not like you are making those students what they are. You're not making them. They're making themselves. But what you're doing is creating the right environment for that to be able to happen. But it's the environment that's the important thing, not you. And it seems like you've absolutely nailed that. The other thing, a little bit earlier, you were talking about pressure, and I think you talked about wanting to force it, and in a way that was a negative kind of mindset. And it reminded me of the martial arts Tai Chi, which I don't practice, but I read a little bit about it, and I was fascinated that, Tai Chi is all about the flow and embracing the energy and going with the energy rather than trying to oppose it. So I remember seeing a video of this guy who was being attacked, and instead of going forward, he just let the energy come towards him and then dealt with it. The guy ended up on the floor, but it wasn't using force, it was using the energy that was already there in the situation. And again, when you were talking about, you wanted to create this positive impact and you decided that it would just be one person, that then becomes hugely liberating, right?
Yes. And now when you actually, I like the way how you framed it, with their teacher taking responsibility for the performance of the students. I think it's a little bit selfish, because you think you have the power over somebody else and somebody else's capacities and abilities, and then it's ego talking to us, right? Because you might be there for the person, observe the process, create the framework. And it reminded me, like recently you asked, because I've been traveling a lot. Before Vietnam, I was in Laos and I stayed for 3.5 weeks in a convent, Christian convent, and we had a call with you. I'm not sure if I told you, there was so I was teaching English to girls who were saved from sexual slavery and organ transplantation, and also the design, fashion design. So they would have a skill after they would finish their school that's part of the church, so they can actually either work there because there is a workshop already arranged through donations, and make some living, or go somewhere else and make some living. And it was what I didn't realize. I mean, not that anybody would give me a profile on each person, right? On each girl, and how they were impacted by the past experiences, how long they're living there. They were all different age. So I had in the same class kids from the age of 11 to 16, and it's completely different. It's like a young woman in comparison to somebody who's entering puberty.
Yeah.
How is rain? Is it too loud?
It's fine.
Can you still hear me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And it was interesting that I didn't take into consideration that they were not there to study. They were there, they were living there. So they were family. And I realized that they happened to come to my class, and I'm in the role of a teacher. They are not students per se, they are family all together to study. So it took me a while to understand, because there was they were from this Akha tribe. It's a very small ethnic group in Laos, and from the mountains. So they don't speak Lao, and they speak Akha language, which I didn't understand at all, because at first I would tell them translate into Lao, so they would have English and Lao translation. And some people would write it from somebody else's notebooks, but then they couldn't read it. And I was like, how come you write it, but you can't read it? And I couldn't, but it was two completely different languages. So that was my ignorance, because I didn't, but it's also, sometimes maybe it's a blessing that I wasn't introduced to their traumatic experiences, not to be overwhelmed, because I treated them equally with respect. and I didn't address their traumatic experiences or victim states. I treated them as, per se, like just somebody who I care about. There was one day when I was strict with the girls. They were in the front row, and they were younger, the youngest, and they didn't do the homework. So they couldn't do the homework because they can't read, right? They didn't know at that point. And it's like, we write everything. We even draw the person, the body parts, the garments. But then I realized they didn't do the homework, not because they were lazy. They were living at the convent, so they had to take care of the chicken, cook 3 times a dinner from scratch, do the gardening, feed the fish, clean the space. So like, they would come to my class after everything is done so many times, set up the table, clean the table, sweep the floor. It was like, so they were working nonstop. They didn't have the kids time to sit down, and just study English.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they were youngest. But I thought I was doing it like, in a fun way. It's like, okay, you come to my class, not prepared. And there was a girl at the third row, the oldest one. She tears the pages from her notebook. She looks into my eye. She tears them apart. She goes to the trash bin and she throws them and she leaves. And I wasn't directing at her or anything. I go into that trash can. I pick them. Beautiful handwriting. So she would take the notes during the class, and then afterwards at night or in the evening, she would write them beautifully, English and Lao translation, different types of the pen, It was amazingly written. And I think that was a message to me. And my first reaction was like responsive. I was like, how dare she? Like, who is she? I'm like teaching here for free. She doesn't understand the benefit of all of this. Because I told them that day, I said, like, you need English as a skill to kind of, elevate in life afterwards, to make better living, and maybe to even actually finally financially helping your families, though, who left in the villages. Some of them had parents, some of them didn't. And I slept on that thought because that was the emotion was negative, right? I was like furious. Then I was like, there is something for me to learn. It's not her. The trigger is not her. The trigger is something in the past. And next day, she refused to come to my textile workshop during the day. She would be just, because everybody was there, and she would be just hanging out with them, but she wouldn't stitch. She was like protesting. And I came up to her and I put her notes torn, and I said, you have very beautiful handwriting. And there was a volunteer from France, she translated. And everybody started paying attention. And she was like, and I said, please don't give up on yourself. That day in the evening, she started joining my cooking class because we would make pies in the evening. She started joining my English class. She rewrite all the notes. And I realized it's because I found this, what triggered me, and I found the love that's nevertheless, right? So she was protecting her sisters, right? I did something that affected her because she was so much overprotecting of these girls that were not her biological sister. They just happened to live in the same convent.
Yeah.
And for me, it was the beautiful story of love, how 9 people who didn't know each other happened to be in a completely different city, thousands of miles away from their families, who might see them again, who might not. Some of them had no family at all. And she was teaching me the lesson. Like, you don't do this to us. We are family. And I thought just me making that step, coming up to her, I couldn't have said anything like, you don't dare behave like this, right? Or you didn't want to attend the English class, get out of my textile class. But I thought, no. She teaches me a lesson of love and compassion. And I was so grateful. So when I was departing, she gave me the strongest hug and she cried.
It's a beautiful story. And that what you're touching on here is how, instead of relying on the authority invested by the system, you chose to communicate as one human being to another. And I don't know why, but I'm thinking here of, I did a project in a prison a number of years ago. And we did workshops which were mixed groups of prison officers and also the people that were serving their sentences. It was a men's prison. And the input from the people serving their sentences was so much more valuable than from the prison officers. And the reason this has come to mind is because it just struck me that a lot of the challenges that occur in that environment are because the officers tend not to have very high-level social skills and the sort of skills that you've just described. Instead, they rely on the power invested in them by the structure of the system. And of course, that means that they're not respected a lot of the time by the people that are on the receiving end of them telling them what to do. So it's a very unhealthy environment, and is a complete contrast to what you've just described in terms of the relationship that you were able to create there. One other thing about positive impact that's in my mind I just wanted to share was, you remember earlier you were saying about the teacher taking responsibility for the performance and ego gets in the way. When I was listening to you, I just thought of a garden where you're growing plants or vegetables or whatever it is, right? And what you don't do is stand there with maybe, you know, the small shoot just come through the surface of the earth. What you don't do is say, come on, you need to grow faster. What's your target going to be? How tall are you going to be? You don't do that, right? That would be insane. But what you do is you water it and you make sure it gets the right level of light. And if it needs extra nourishment, then you deal with that. So it's just reinforcing this message that we were talking about earlier, where you are responsible for creating the environment. You're not responsible for the growth. The growth will happen as a result of the environment. So just wanted to share that. And then I've got a question, actually, which has been in my mind for a few minutes now in this conversation. So we've talked about the benefit of not paying so much attention to the measurement and the target and all the rest of it. However, what I am struggling to rationalize is that approach with a world that is recognized as being maybe the epitome of high performance, which is sport. And let's take athletics specifically. And here you absolutely do work on measurement. And that's the only way you know whether the person is a bit better than the other person. It's highly competitive, but does encourage the highest level of performance. And yet that seems to be a contradiction with what we've just been talking about. So I'm really interested to hear your views about that.
I don't think there is a contradiction. And thank you for raising. First of all, I like how you perceive the world in sketches. Every time we talk and you have the visions and you describe them, I think it's amazing how it's like pops into your mind straight away. I would like to continue on their prisoners, maybe not as much as the guards, but those. How old were you? How old were the kids, or were they young gentlemen who were imprisoned?
No, it was adult.
Adult. Okay, because I'm interested in working with juvenile delinquents. It's like those who happened to be in the system before the age of 21, before their frontal the frontal lobe was developed. They couldn't make a decision, right? And most of the times you find that those kids are from unpleasant conditions and the households, right? Where like most of the times it's either single parenthood or socioeconomics. And I think it's like up to, it was something like 89, 87%. And the reason they commit the crime in the first place is because they were not taught boundaries with the world. It's like what you do, what you don't do.
Yeah.
So I find it's since I understood, because like I always had a tendency to work with them, I couldn't quite explain why. I didn't want to work with them because I feel sorry. That's what I stopped doing, actually. no matter how much suffering people were experiencing, like how difficult were the conditions, the only condition I have before entering the workshop space, I don't feel sorry for people, because I believe it's also putting yourself above of their sorrow. Like, I was like, oh, I'm enlightened, I'm here to teach you guys, to bring you up to my level. So then, like, you have all of these measurements, which are in the world of status. There are measurements, right? So there are measurements, either numbers, or in the world, and there are two status games that we engage in. And I think I last year managed to get out of the second one, the intellectual game, who is smarter. Because like the day you leave the financial status game, you think you are better than those, and that is thinking better than whoever, whatever it is, you engage in the intellectual status game. And so like I take off this like feeling of sorry, right, before I enter them. But then I realized they were unfortunate to be born in a certain household.
Yeah.
They were not taught what good was bad. And then they go through their misconduct, maybe sometimes not being aware that it's really bad.
Yeah.
We know what's good, what's bad, but we never know what they're like, what happened. Like a group of people, you can't make a decision on your own. You are going to, I don't know, rob somebody, and you happen to be there. And unfortunately, it's like you end up in a prison cell. And then the whole prison system all over the world is not to help you heal, forgive you, and forgive yourself, is to punish.
Yeah.
And when I realized, like, put it all together, so we are punishing those who were unfortunate to be born in a less social economic classes, that's actually heartbreaking. And I think that's why you managed to get more information from that target group rather than from the guards working there, because those people are struggling and suffering, right? And when you happen to be in prison, you have kind of like more time. That's why I think most of them like start searching for God and the truth and repent, is because there is pain inside.
Yeah.
And I think they want to find answers. It's just they don't know which way to go, right? And I would say when it comes to measurements in sports, I think it's Sapolsky. He has a series of lectures on stress and body and how stress impacts. And there is a lecture on sport activities. It's like, if you're upset with doing sports, we shouldn't do that. It doesn't impact the body in a positive way. And I don't know the statistics about the athletes who were performing to the best of their physical abilities because their parents once brought them into a swimming school, right, boxing school, I don't know, running school, and then so much money were invested and personal training and all these competitions and the set of gear so that they have the feeling that they have to. But I know a fair decent amount of sports people who don't keep in touch with their parents. One of them is actually, it's a ballet dancer, famous ballet dancer. He was Russian at the age of 14, I think. He was in the Royal Opera. I forgot the name. Oh my God. And he was one of the best ballet dancers in the world for a few years' time when he decided to get on drugs. There was an amazing documentary about him. And he said he felt like he had to do it because there was so much pressure, and then eventually financial pressure, like he was helping the family and stuff like that. But he realized that it wasn't his choice. And yes, we can see a person perform and go above and beyond somebody's physical, biological kind like abilities, but are they happy? Like, we're measuring them, but what do we measure? Do we measure their internal pain? Do we measure their parents' imposed wishes and ideas that they failed to deliver? And because I would love to read a study like that when they say, like, you know what, I've chosen it myself. I wanted to do it my whole life long, because we know that professional sports are not good. It's too much, right? It's like, it's extreme. It's not good for your health. It's not good for your knees. It's not good for anything. And then they are a wreck. And they leave the sports quite early as well, being a wreck. Like the ballet dancers, the ladies, their feet don't look like ladies' feet, right? Though the rest of the body tells us the opposite. So it's like, I don't think that, I think if it's chosen, you would perform above the average because you would be there for yourself. But it's such a small amount of people who do it on a professional level because they enjoy it, not because once they were put in the situation where they had to feel like they had to do it because too much pressure again, and right, like families, investments, time and money wise were already like dedicated to their development.
Yeah, it's a fantastic point. There are a number of things. So first, what's coming through for me is there's this thing around how we might have strengths, but when you overplay a strength, it can actually become a weakness. And to your example, just because you're really good at one small part of your life, for instance, a sport, doesn't necessarily mean that you're a whole human being that's enjoying life. And there's I saw a video recently of Roger Federer giving a graduation ceremony speech, and he talks about how tennis is not life, you know, and he was encouraging people to think more broadly. I'll send you the link because I think you'll enjoy it. And then just going back to the prison, I wanted to share what I thought was a beautiful story from that project as well. At one of the coffee breaks, I was talking to one of the guys who must have been probably around 60 years old. And he explained to me that since the age of 17, he had only been out of institutions for a maximum period of 18 months at any point in time. So continually going back into institutions. And he shared with me that he had recently lost his brother, and that his brother was the last remaining member of his first family. And what he said was that it made me realize that I don't want to leave like all of the other members of my family. I don't want to leave this planet without having done something with my life. And then he explained that he realized that he was the very best person to advise juveniles who had gone into the system, because he had so much experience, right? And he said, I just realized that I'm the very best person to teach these guys. And so that's what he had decided to do. And he was just starting to do his training and all of this sort of stuff, which was a really uplifting. I'm feeling quite emotional actually just telling the story, but it was a really uplifting story to hear. Somebody towards the end of their life, at the end of the system, but having realized something and making a decision to do something and create a positive impact for other people. So just wanted to share that. Now, in ValuesJam, there is the opportunity for you to create your own question about positive impact, right? So please ask your own question about positive impact, beginning with who, what, where, when, why, or how. And then either you can go first to answer your question, or I can, and we'll see where we go.
How can we make positive impact the norm of day-to-day life for everybody?
Okay, and do you have the answer immediately, or shall I have a go?
I want to hear your answer. It was for you.
So how can we make positive impact the norm? I think the three things come to mind. One is to inspire and encourage an attitude where people are striving to create positive impact, and maybe that's connected to the environment discussion that we had earlier. So first, create an environment where positive impact is inspired and encouraged. Secondly, explain what positive impact has been achieved. So that's kind of the measurement piece. And thirdly, recognize those people that have achieved positive impact to inspire others. So environment, measurement, recognition.
So we go back to measurement.
Yeah, I think we do, because without it, but not measurement first, right? Measurement
Yeah.
as a follow-up to
Mm.
reinforce. So in that example about the call center earlier, um, what I did at the end of the year was say, guys, we achieved 90%. That is amazing because nobody ever expected that this would be the case. And it's only when they knew what they had achieved that they were able to feel good about it and could be encouraged to go again.
When you mentioned that example, I wanted to also add to that. I think it's not the measurement, which is we just need it for statistics, right? For kind of like the progress rather than for bonuses. That's I loved it that you took it out of equation. So for them, it was we do whatever we can do to the top of our ability, and we'll see what happens because we're not losing money anyway. So there's you took the fear away,
Yeah.
fear of losing money, because pain or losing money, it's actually physically associated with pain in the body. So you took the pain away, but then what you did, you empowered them with the choice they made themselves. You didn't tell them what to do. You were not like the teacher that tells them what to do. You said like, do whatever you want, do as much as you want. I trust you. So no fear, introduce trust, and personal choice that they introduced. And I once used to live and work in Italy. I was teaching in a boarding school. It's like Ivo de Carneri University as part of the Oxford School, boarding school. And beautiful village, nice kids, complicated age. Last year before going into the universities and like living their adult lifestyle, right? It's like somebody in love, somebody started smoking and sneaking, and you deal with all of that. But somebody said, I want to be a bomb. In this country, he was very smart. In this country, you have good social care. Why do I need to study? I will just be a bomb and I will receive enough money. My parents will die soon. I will inherit the house and I'll just stay at home, play computer games. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And I didn't say anything. Like he would just show up for the class, not participate, because his plan was to be a bomb professionally. And I told him that, you know what? Whatever mark you want me to give you or whatever it is, because I was not allowed to kick them out. It's a private school, right? They pay a lot of money. But I was allowed to open the door and said, everybody who doesn't want to be here for whatever reason. And they had issues with me because I was like strict teacher. They called me a specific word in Italian and I could hear it before I would approach. They would go and complain how strict I was. But so I was like, you don't like the way I dress because they complained about my looks. You don't like the way I talk. You don't like the way I teach. The door is open. You have A. You don't need to hear. At least sleep in the morning. Why to wake up and be bothered to come to my class, right? And when I allowed them to leave, and they stayed because they wanted to stay, and they performed.
Yeah.
And the guy who wanted to be a bomb 2 years later, when I visited, was the top performing student. And I believe that's the thing. So what you did, you empowered them with the personal choice, because when you don't have a choice, that's again stressful, again Sapolsky. It's like very stressful. You feel disempowered. You feel like you, no matter what you would do, there's either somebody to control, and this control puts pressure, right? And you took the fear away of losing money, physical and mental. So I think you created the best conditions for them as a gardener to grow. You created, and I think the measurement might follow, but more as a fun activity, right? So shall we repeat it again next year? Or do you think we want to try better? It's like, but it's not because we have to, but
Exactly.
because we can.
Yeah.
There is this successful businessman in this part of the world. I think he is Malaysian, Australian / Singaporean business person. Very, according to Forbes, very successful. Happened to be my mentor accidentally. He's like checking me and my journaling processes with my game. And so he just journals about how much he wants to make, not because he needs, but because it's fun. So he just writes a number that's impossible to achieve. And first time he did his startup, it was 10 million. And that year he made 100 million. And I just love the whole idea of, again, taking the pressure where we started, right? Taking the pressure away from their framework and the system and just like making it fun all the way through.
And this brings me back to the creation of ValuesJam, because when we were talking about this game at the beginning, we were saying, so what are we doing? And what we said was, well, actually, what we want to do is create harmony all over the world by inspiring 1 million values-led conversations. And then this is with Lisa, the lady that I co-created the game with. And we said, okay, so then we flipped into, the normal business kind of mode of, oh, right, so what time frame should we put on it? I remember us having this conversation, but we said, we don't care. It's like, it doesn't really matter how long it takes. We just want, and 1 million was just a random number, right? So all we're saying is what we want to do is inspire values-led conversations. That's it. And we will do that. And that's what we've gone ahead and done. So isn't it interesting how we've come around full circle there? And I think actually because of that closing of the circle, this is probably a good time to bring this ValuesJam to a close. And it's always done in the same way with one final question. So Anita, what are you encouraged to do differently about positive impact as a result of our conversation today?
I think I would introduce it to my teaching practice, but not myself, but as a topic for people to start implementing it in their lives. The question was like how we can do it day-to-day norm. I think I will just discussing this concept with everybody that would come to my lectures or classes in order to start the conversation and spread the wave of positive impact.
Okay, and what if I was to ask you when you're going to have the first opportunity to take your first step towards doing that? When will that be, and what will it be?
It is 25th of August. I start teaching the summer language school for British students in Tbilisi. So my first week, would be on the positive impact, the topic of the week, and all the vocabulary around that.
Fantastic. Well, what a positive impact we've created as a result of this conversation.
Yeah.
Mine is
yes, and yeah.
I'm involved with a number of kind of new projects at the moment, and what this has encouraged me to do is apply this freedom approach that we've talked about to the measurement of positive impact for each of those. So one of them, for instance, is a model of kindness and how that might help organizations create friendlier organizations and friendlier cultures. Another one is a virtual reality platform. And we have started to have the thinking and the conversations in the normal business sense around targets and all the rest of it. But what I'm going to do is kind of come free from that because it's, yeah. So your guy, what did you say? He set out to make 10 million and he made 100 million?
Yes, tenfold more, tenfold more.
Yeah, so why would you restrict yourself to the 10, right?
This is the thing, this is a good one. And today it was a lot of about like freeing and measuring, right? So it's like, I think maybe their conclusion would be free ourselves from measuring, because
Yeah.
we thought it was like pressure free and then measuring something performances. But I also, that's when it stopped actually being strict. Do you know the difference between an amazing morning and all right?
Say it again.
An amazing.
Isn't it typical? The signal just dropped. Try again.
Oh my God. But like, do you know the difference? And I just realized it recently between an amazing morning and on an all right morning to impact the rest of the day. What
Well,
would be the
it might sound a bit trite, but my response to that is your attitude is the difference. Well, Anita, I hope you come back. But if you don't, this is Zoom's way of telling us that this Values Jam has come to a close. So let me thank you.